Today I wanted to show you my grease pencil brush pack for Blender. I'm going to take you through how to add them to your files, how you can save your startup files so you always have them, and I will show you go through some of the pencil brushes, and there's a few pens, and show you how the stamp tool can help speed up your workflow in Blender. In order to add the brushes to your Blender file, you'll want to go to File, hit Append, and then you'll want to find where you saved out the file from Gumroad. And once you have that file selected, you'll want to hit Append. It'll open up a new folder browser. You'll want to go to Brush, and then here you can see you have all of your different brushes that live inside that Blender file. Mine are sorted with MV with my initials, so you'll want to just highlight all of them and then hit Append. And then when you open up your side toolbar with N, you should be able to see all of the brushes here. As you can see, I already have them installed, so there's double pencils here, but that's how you should add them. And they should come with the thumbnails as well. So that's how they all live. That's how you can add them onto your Blender file. If you would like to keep it that way and every time you start up, in case it doesn't, you can go to File, Defaults, Save Startup File. And when you save that, it'll save everything that you have going on in your Blender file as your default startup file for Blender. So I've got some brushes, which consist of pencils, pens, 1 or 2 markers, and a couple of chalk brushes. And then I also have a stamp and kind of nature brush with a bit of like gritty brushes and some textured things for quickly making grass or trees and things like that. So I'll show you how you can one, just draw with them, and 2, also how you can scatter them through along like a mesh, so you can have like a bit of a landscape if you want something in the background. So I've got a couple of pencils here. I've got an HB one, which is kind of your softest pencil. If you press harder, and depending on your settings, you can get a decent texture. And I looked and studied at actual pencils and stuff like that, so try to make it as realistic as possible. I think the 2B can maybe be a little bit softer like the HB, so I might make an update to that, but this is now the 4B. So as you can see, it kind of gives a pencil, kind of looks like a pencil in my opinion. If you test out the no, I see. So those are the different pencils I have. So if you just want to do some sketching, some character designs, or like a still life kind of thing, you can totally do that. Now, the way these actually work is they are textured brushes, and they use a dot, a line type of dots, and they're all like basically little image textures. So I've gone from Photoshop, I created the actual like image that it uses, and then just done a bunch of tweaking with the tool settings and stuff like that. So if I zoom in here, if you can see that it's just a bunch of tiny dots, for each point it's showing the image texture. And that's how Blender works. So it's not, it doesn't quite work like Photoshop because it's vector based, but this kind of gives you the illusion at a certain distance, what the stroke looks like. So obviously if you're like zooming in past a character, it's not going to hold when you zoom in like that. You'll want to use a different kind of brush where you don't have a dot image texture. Something to keep in mind that like if you're storyboarding and you want to dolly past a character, it's probably best not to use one of these textured dotted brushes. So I've got a couple of different ones here. This is an animator kind of pencil, which, a long time ago I saw a brush pack that had an animator pencil, and I really liked how it was like kind of textured a little bit. So again, if you zoom in, it doesn't look that great, but at a distance, at the right distance, it's good. And most of the pencil sizes hover between 5 and 10 pixels. So if I just zoom out here and show you, like, this is how far away my camera is from the strokes. So here's the origin of the stroke. So that's just something to keep in mind. The file that you got from Gumroad should actually give you that same distance. It should be set up that way. So this is the Animator pencil. So I like to use this for storyboarding because it's got a thick line and you know, or it's like a consistent brush. Got this blotchy ink, which is kind of interesting. So it could be good for character designing if you're, you know, kind of loose, and gives you different lines and stuff like that, which is kind of fun. So it's got like a random radius effect as you draw. A Bristol brush, so this one's got like a bit of a fan tip at the end of it. This one was kind of fun to play around with. Again, maybe something more for drawing characters or being loose, or maybe some live action storyboarding if you just need to, like, you know, block in some stuff real quick and show people. I don't know, it's kind of nice. You can see what happens if we increase the size, so you get, you know, it kind of still holds. Again, Blender is not the best drawing tool, so there's still some like artifacting. So when you go back and forth, you can see here on the corners, it doesn't quite, you know, go around smoothly as if you did this. So those are just things to keep in mind with Blender. This is brush marker. So this one's pretty, you know, you can brush something in. This one's kind of nice because you can keep it a small pixel size, or you can also bring it up and you get kind of like a traditional marker. And this one doesn't really artifact as much as the other one, so it's kind of, you know, you can shade things in or just block in some shapes or something like that. We have a concept pen, so this was kind of inspired by kind of keep having a lighter, you know, more one of those like technical pencils. Yeah, kind of like that. So you could maybe design ships and things like that with this, which is kind of cool. A crayon, trying to get, this is size 10. Yeah, this one's kind of tricky, but I think the more you press on it, it kind of gives you different UV texture. So here, kind of, the lighter you press, the less of an effect it kind of gives off with the image texture. So the harder you press, you can get more of, I think it randomizes more the texture itself. So it works a little bit better when you pressing a little bit harder, but it's kind of fun. It's also fun to draw some characters with this as well. So yeah, it's got a little bit of an opacity change to it, which is nice. See, I've got a dark sketch pencil. So again, this is just kind of like the Animator pencil, just slightly different texture, but it's a little bit more texturized. You can zoom in and see it kind of gives off a bit of a hairy texture, which I actually have a hairy brush as well, so we can compare the two. This one actually has more noise kind of coming off the side here, so you can see this is the dark and this is the hairy. And as you can see, when I zoom in, you can see I haven't changed the actual pixel size of the brush, yet it looks different when you actually zoom in and draw. And there's a setting for that, which I can actually show you. Depending on how you have your strokes displayed, will change how your brushes actually show up. So if I lower this real quick. So if you go to your grease pencils settings, and then you go down to strokes, you can see the stroke depth is in 2D layers and 3D location. So that depends if your layer is below something, then that will appear behind regardless of where it actually is in 3D space, or you can do 3D location. So if your layer is below, but it's actually in front of the layer above, then it will render in front of that. So I usually do 2D layers in case there's a mistake. So I know that one layer below will render behind. And then you have this stroke thickness. You either have world space or screen space. So if you do screen space, you can see it automatically changes the appearance of the line thickness. And the reason behind that is that it's rendering based off of, the screen space versus where it actually is in the world. So I think I usually keep it on world space because it renders differently as the character is further away, which again is kind of an issue for these image textures because when you get closer to it, it really becomes apparent. Screen space is it's rendering based on the camera, and you can play around with it, but I think when you zoom in, okay, so that's a good example. So if I do screen space and you zoom in, your strokes, like the line thickness reduces considerably, whereas if I do world space, it holds better. It just is the thickness where it is in the world itself. So it doesn't actually change. Let's see if I do this. Yeah, just in relation to where the screen is. So I prefer to keep it on world space. And again, when I'm doing this, I'm not zooming in with the camera. I'm just zooming. I'm increasing the camera view. If I lock camera to view, then I'm actually zooming in the camera. So I usually keep that off. I've got a hard chalk. So let's see. I'm gonna increase this a little bit. So as you can see, it works a little bit better when you press a little bit harder, but this is supposed to be similar to the 8B. It's like an ebony kind of pencil where it just basically goes all black pretty quick. This is a hard pencil, which is pretty similar to, it's a little bit rougher than the Animator one, a little bit of softness, and that's our HB that we looked at earlier. I'll compare the soft chalk to the hard chalk. So this is soft. As you can see, it takes a little bit more effort to get a harder opacity. And then the hard chalk here. This becomes opaque pretty quick, not soft. We've got a sketch marker. So this is much more pen-like. Yeah, it's got like a square image texture, which is kind of interesting, but it kind of gives off this like a little bit of a wetter feeling than the pencils. I can increase this to 10. You can kind of see it just acts a little bit more, trying to get like a Sharpie kind of brush. When you kind of overlap it like this, you can see it renders more like a marker. That was a soft one. And then I've got this light marker, which you can increase this one. This is kind of just your typical like round brush with an opacity, so you can layer it and add to it. It doesn't have the artifacting issue because it should actually just be a line brush. Light gray marker. Yeah, this one's a line instead of a dot. So that's why you don't get that weird artifact when you zigzag back and forth. So that helps. Here's a rough pen. This one has just kind of like, you can see that the texture is like a little, it changes the radius a little bit. This one also works as a line texture, so it's not dotted, which means it can hold up better for like storyboarding and stuff. So when you zoom in, you don't see all these little dots and things like that. So that works a bit better that way. So this one's pretty nice for actually doing storyboards in 3D space. So I just draw this character here, and then if I were to like zoom in past him, you get that parallax, but you don't actually ruin, the brush stroke doesn't become apparent, so that's kind of nice. I've got a story brush, which is more or less just a basic pen, but it's got a little bit of some radius tweaks, I think, to it, and so it's a pretty standard pen brush. And then I've got a Story pen, which functions similarly. It's just a bit of a thinner line and actually gives you a bit of an opacity thing. So if you wanted to start like a little lighter on somebody, you know, something like that, and then you can also still get a bigger stroke in there if you need to. You can bring this up to 10 depending on your relative space as well. So you can see here it's like pretty light where I'm barely touching the screen, and then as soon as you press harder it gets darker. So there's some versatility, whereas the other one is more just, this is the brush, the Story brush. It's just going to keep the same radius more or less, and then the same opacity. So that's pretty much it for the different pens and pencils. I'm going to now show you some of the stamp brushes. The idea behind these is that the stroke, there's a post-processing feature with the grease pencil tools, and I've done this. I've changed the simplify feature, which basically when you draw, you can see that it's filling in like a ton of grass, but actually it just renders a few of them. So you can actually play around with this. So if I turn this off, you can see now like it's just it's not reducing the number of points. Because if I go into edit mode here and I select, you can see if I'm in selecting stroke mode, you can see I can just select the whole stroke. But if I'm in, if I go up here and select the vertex, you can see the individual points where the actual image texture lives. And if I select this one where I had the simplify off, there's tons of them, which is why it's so much more dense. And the idea behind this was to kind of just like scatter and apply these textures. So you can totally play around with these, and you know, keep them kind of low probably if you don't want it to be too dense. So here you can kind of, you know, brush, and this one's got like a random rotation on it, so you can see that kind of thing. I've got that brush, that stamp tool. So if you type in, if you're in your, whether you're using Whippet GP or your tool, if you just search stamp, you could find them all like that, MV stamp, and they should come up. So I've got this other grass one, again, just slightly different design. I drew these in Photoshop, just kept it pretty simple and graphic. And again, you can go down to post-processing and reduce it, and then you can, you know, it doesn't quite work when you, like this one doesn't work like that, because it doesn't have any random rotation. So you do want a little bit of 0.02. Let's see what that does. Yeah, see, so you can kind of, if you do this, if you just keep going back and forth, you'll add a bunch. So you kind of, you have a little bit of control in that sense, which is kind of nice. I actually prefer the Whippet GP because I changed how the menu shows up. It has more rows and columns, so you can see more of your brushes, so you don't have to scroll up and down. So here's some tree clusters. So these I took I was hiking here in Colorado, and I took some pictures of some trees, obviously, and just kind of Photoshop them, remove the background, and now you kind of have like a tree cluster. It was on a slope, so I have 3 different ones. So here you can kind of, you know, if you want to get, you could do like you could just brush this in, and then you can have like a drone shot, right? And you have all this parallax pretty quickly. If you just need to block something in and you don't want to add a bunch of assets to your scene, or, you know, set up a bunch of 3D stuff, and you just want to get to the story. So that's the point of those. If you just lightly press one, you should be able to get one, and again, you can draw a bunch of them. A cool feature that you can do is you can use the color attribute mode, which then if you go to your tool settings, it gives you this. Sorry, if I go back and show you just the material setting, which is black, the material is black. And if I go to color attribute, it ungrays these variables here under your randomize. settings, so you can actually change the randomness of the color and the value, so the hue, saturation, and value. So I've got this default set to 0.1 for the value. So now if I paint these trees in, I'm getting a randomization of different values. And what's kind of cool about that is because then you can say, like this one, for instance, if I just want, you know, some trees that are supposed to indicate like a hillside or something, I have like a bit more, it kind of helps vary up the trees a bit. It's a little, see now when you zoom through, it, you know, it looks a little bit different. Like the trees are just lit differently and gives you some more variety in there, which is kind of cool. Same goes for this one, and that setting carries over to your other brushes. So let's see, yeah, 0.1 is usually what I have. So if you increase this to a lot, I think you get a massive variation, which, you know, for some things could be cool. But I keep it at 0.1 because I still want things to, you know, try and be as dark as possible, or try to reduce the random value just for the sake of storyboarding. So it's kind of cool. Like some are in shadow, some are not, that kind of thing. I also have these two tree texture, like tree bark textures. One's a bamboo one. So here you could kind of just, you know, put in a couple of straight strokes and you get some bamboo, which is kind of neat. If you like happen to do kind of a shaky stroke, if you have the grease pencil tools add-on, you can also hit straight stroke, which will actually straighten your thing. I've got that to my quick favorites, so I can delete these, and like if I do that, I can just go straight stroke and then straight stroke. The shift draw feature, which you have in like Storyboard Pro and Photoshop, doesn't quite work well with image textures with certain brushes in Blender, so I would avoid that. I think maybe if you use a line tool, it's better. Yeah, there you go. But then you have to hit like enter or the one of your clicks on your pen, so you could do that. That works better. So that is one of the tree bark textures. This other one works as if you were to, it's basically drawing a stroke, and then you actually get a, it fills in the stroke with an image texture, and it's kind of random depending on where you start your brush from, which is kind of cool. So here you can get like a bunch of trees in really quickly and move them around in 3D space, or add like a foreground grease pencil object, midground, background, and then you could dolly through it and you get some parallax, that kind of thing. That's the best way, and you can draw over these image textures and add some branches and things like that to them. So that's pretty neat. I usually keep that at 75. That should be the default. And then I've got these leaf textures as well. So I've got one that's inspired by the bamboo leaves. So if I do, hit straight stroke, and then I grab this leaf thing, it's supposed to go in the direction you draw, so you can, study it like that. Oh, I have draw strokes on back. Let me turn that off. And now you have them in front. So here you can see I kind of just threw bamboo together. You can just copy them over and quickly get a forest or bamboo canopy, that kind of thing. So this is kind of nice to play around with, and I mean, it even works with so it's in the direction that you draw. So I'm going from bottom to top with my strokes, and here you can if you want to get some other kind of bushes in, that kind of thing, tall grass, that works as well. And then I've got this kind of smaller leaf. It's like a bunch of leaves just kind of scattered. So if you want to do like a typical tree, you can do this and then get that in. And again, if you turn on the color attribute, you should be able to get a variation in value, which is kind of nice. So you can get some that look like they're in the foreground or lit, and etc. And then you can take whatever kind of brush you want, turn off color attribute, use the material, and then here you can quickly block in some tree branches, and yeah. So let me set up a little 3D environment, and I'll show you how to actually scatter the stamp brushes, like the trees, for instance, which is pretty cool. So here I'm gonna add a mesh landscape, and we're gonna do that. It's gonna be a solid. I'm gonna go ahead and just make it a little bit bigger. Maybe a little bit, something like this. So now what we can do is we can grab our, need to select our grease pencil object, and we're gonna do stamp. And then I'm gonna turn this up to 500, make it as big as possible. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna switch where the strokes are drawn to surface, and then I'm gonna reduce it to, I guess I probably had it at the right setting. We're just gonna leave it somewhere close to 0. And we can do view. And I've got these brushes oriented so that they should always be pointing up. So now if I draw here on the surface, whoa, let me increase the simplify. And now if I zoom out here, you can see that I've actually drawn them in different places. So if I just move around the mesh here, see how they are actually, oops, I hit shift there. They're actually in different locations on the mesh, which is pretty cool because now you can get, you know, a shot like this. In order to actually make it live where it should on the surface, probably need to increase this. That's better. It's a little tricky to get it to land right. See, now it's hovering above it. So that's one of the issues with the tree one. It's kind of hard to actually get it to, but you can always fix it afterwards. You know, you can select the stroke here and kind of just lift them up a little bit. Oops. Oh, quick tip, the way I'm seeing the textures in object mode, or in the solid view render instead of material preview, so I can actually see the mesh better. If you go up to your view settings, your viewport shading, you want to change the color to texture. That way you can stay in solid mode while being able to actually see the GB textures, your brush textures. Definitely forgot to mention that at the start of the video. You have to be in textured material preview, rendered view, which renders textures, or solid, and then you want to activate instead of material, you want to activate the texture. So here, yeah, the point of this is to be able to just kind of scatter some trees around. If you reduce or if you increase the simplification, you can kind of, you know, you get less trees if you want to make it less dense, like a park or something. And then, yeah, you can, you know, quickly get like a shot like this. You know, further back, if you want to move one of these trees. There you go. If you want to move one of these trees back a little bit and put them in the right place, you can totally do that. So now, I don't know, you know, you could set up like a little 3D environment here, and then you could also just screenshot this, and now you have all of these, you know, branch textures, and you could bring it into Photoshop or Storyboard Pro, and you could just animate over top of that, and you quickly get like an artistic brush. And again, you could totally just paint your own tree in Photoshop and then switch out under properties. You go to your materials, create a new grease pencil material here, and then just or switch it out here and just change the image that it's looking up to. That's all you have to do, and you can have your own, you know, your own style of tree in here and that kind of thing. Again, this is a picture I took of a tree here in Colorado, and just kind of just removed the background and cleaned it up a little bit. So when you get close to it, it's, you know, pretty pixelated, but again, just for quickly getting a 3D kind of environment with some landscape and trees in there, it's pretty handy. You can delete this, and then for instance, if you pick the grass texture, you could kind of just draw over the mesh, and then now you can see how it's actually let's put this to 0.1, right? It actually draws on top of that mesh. So now you can see I've put grass all over the mesh. And if you reduce 0.05, now it's kind of in, see, it kind of sticks through a little bit. So there's a bit of playing around, probably also depends on the mesh, that kind of thing. But this is nice. And then if you, have the color attribute version, right, you can quickly, you can also change the size of it. You have some variation here. You know, just painted a bunch here, and then, oh, see, now it's floating. I think it's relative to your view, which is actually quite tricky. So you might want to just double check that. I think so. It's probably better to actually get closer. Yeah, see, now it sticks in. So it's relative to your view. There's probably a fix for this, but at the moment I don't know it. So yeah, so here you can, you know, get up close, have a low shot, grass everywhere. Yeah, it's nice to be able to kind of block it in. So I'm definitely gonna, over time, I'm gonna try and add to the brush pack. You know, I've already got the idea of like a cone. So if you're in a street or something, you could just draw a few cones in or something like that. So hopefully once a month or every 2 months, I'll just try and add some new brushes and stamps and things like that to the brush pack. If you have any questions or feedback, suggestions, please let me know on Instagram, down in the comment section here on YouTube. Again, this was a lot of fun to put together. A lot of late nights going into this. I'm trying to figure it out. It doesn't, you know, Blender Grease Pencil doesn't work like the other applications, so it's a bit tricky to kind of get this to work, but I hope there's, you know, enough there for you to get going and to kind of enjoy this experience of drawing in Blender a little bit more. So yeah, look forward to what you draw, what you post, and have a good one.